Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Dean Jones, the Well Seasoned Librarian. We are in Season 4, Episode 10. Today I have the pleasure of talking with chef and food writer Taffy Elrod. I had a really wonderful time talking to Taffiny today. We talked about all sorts of things food related, and I hope that you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I had having it. I look forward to having her again on the podcast again one day. And we're going to go right to the interview right now, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. My name is Dean Jones, the Well Seasoned Librarian, and today I am honored to have on my podcast Chef Taffy Elrod of Chef's Feed. Taffany, thank you for being on the show.
Hi, Dean. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and you feel welcome to call me Taffy because that's what everybody calls me. So
Okay, sounds good. I'll call you Taffy then. Now, Taffy, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a professional chef. I'm a cooking instructor. I am a recipe developer. Until recently, I ran a restaurant, a pizzeria restaurant full time with my husband. We're in the Hudson Valley in New York. Uh, we relocated here from New York City a few years ago. So, and now, right now, I'm mostly concentrating on recipe development and virtual teaching, etc. Work I can do from home for the time being.
Now, that's quite a resume. Can you tell us a little bit about your restaurant that you owned and some of the work you've done as a food writer?
Sure. So our restaurant, Paradiso Pizza Parlor, was a it's sort of in flux. The door's closed, but we may be reopening if we can find a place, unfortunately, because of 2020, we're just sort of in flux. But it was a traditional, like New York City style family pizzeria, full service. So we had full menu, full service restaurant, but it was a real mom and pop place. My husband and I ran it ourselves. My husband is from former Yugoslavia, from Montenegro, and he has been making pizza for a long time. And I've been cooking for a long time. We decided to try to do something ourselves, and a sort of turnkey place came up available, and we took it, but it was all in a new, we didn't know anything about the area. We had never lived around here. We had never been here before. So it was like quite an undertaking. We just picked up, opened this restaurant, and then proceeded to, be there 7 days a week, 12, 14, 16 hours a day for 5 years. But with all that hard work, and because we had control over everything ourselves, and put all that work in ourselves, we we made it, and I made it until unfortunate circumstances of this last year and a half, 2 years, and it was absolutely, of course, some of the hardest work and some of the biggest challenges I've ever faced in my career, and was also, incredibly rewarding. And I learned so much. Until you've owned your own restaurant, big or small, you just don't know what it means. I think it's like, having a child. We don't have children, but like, you don't know until you have a child what it really means to have a child. You don't know until you have a restaurant what it really means. Even you think oh, I ran this person's restaurant and I worked here, and no, till somebody, like, until it's really all on your head, you just don't know. But it brought some really interesting things into our lives, and opportunities as well. And I don't know what we'll do going forward. I mean, my husband, he's doing some other work right now, but like, he just was born to make pizza. He's really a natural at it. His pizza's delicious. We bump into people all the time who are just asking us, where are you? Like, how can we get some pizza? I did all the cooking, on the menu. I did, and all the managing of the restaurant, and all the, office work and everything like that. And we just handled he did all the pizza and everything. And we just handled the rest, between us. We back and forth. So yeah. And we're right on the west side of the Hudson River, in the like mid Hudson Valley.
Now it's funny because that you mentioned that because I've been talking to people about pizza a lot lately, and it's one of those interesting topics because I think people, once they get a favorite pizzeria, they don't really want to go to some place like, one of the name brand chains I won't mention, but like, we're surrounded by pizza places, but we don't really, our favorites on the other side of the Bay Area, which is like hour and a half, a couple hours away. So if we want to go there, we have to trek out there. So, and we will do that occasionally, but like people are like, how about ordering a pizza locally? And we're like, nah, we're like, I'll just make it myself, who cares? But like, do you find like people are like they want to stick with like a pizzeria if they like it? They're like they don't really want to go anywhere else. There's no competitor that's going to open up. They're going to be like, the hell with that. I'll wait till my pizzeria opens up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that people feel very personal about, and they get connected to whatever they like. We were very, obviously new in the area, and this is a small community. There's a pizzeria here that has been open since I don't know, like for at least 40 years. That at one point was the only pizzeria in town, and where everybody grew up, went there, when they were in school. So it took a while for people to open up to us or even come try us. I mean, and I'm saying, there was people who didn't come in for 2 or 3 years and then finally decided, to come try us. We were doing pizza a little bit different than everybody else in the area. So either people seem to sort of, love us or hate us. They either just loved what we were doing and then they were on board, or it didn't work for them. They wanted to go and stick with their traditional, what they were used to. But we did, I think the thing that we felt, how can I say, like it was that we were really appreciated, or that, we felt honored that people saw us that way, was that, when they would come back from a vacation, they would call us from the airport so they could pick up food on the way home. When their kids would come home from college, the first thing they'd do was call us, for a pie or for whatever else. Our salads, our calzones, our soups. There were certain things that we made that really were different and people really loved them. And I mean, I think one of the most sort of touching and complimentary things that ever happened. We had a regular customer who I would say was probably in her late 70s, early 80s, and we hadn't seen her for a little while, and it turned out she had gotten a bad case of food poisoning from a rotisserie chicken that wasn't properly cooked. On the way, she had her grandson call us on the way home from the hospital where she had had food poisoning to get a dish of my husband's eggplant because it was the only thing that she wanted to eat or thought she could eat. And I don't know if there's a bigger compliment than that. Not just about the food tasting good or whatever, but feeling like it's safe, it's wholesome, and it's home cooking that would be comforting. And we had a lot of people come to us to say, oh, my grandma's in the hospital, or my kid is sick, and we want your soup, we want your pasta, whatever it might be. And that was, for us, that obviously was special and made us feel good, but it also let us know we were doing something right, that people felt like it was good food that they would want to have when they weren't feeling well, or when they wanted to celebrate, or, feed their kids, and on and on.
There's a chain I won't mention, but their pizza's horrible, and but they're cheap. They're really, really cheap, and I think we all know who they are. So how does that hurt business? Because they keep lowballing the price. And I was at a place nearby where I work. It's called Rotten City Pizza. Shout out to a local. And it's amazing pizza, just really good pie. And they do like a couple slices at lunchtime for like $13, $15. But it's artisan pizza, and it's really good. And I don't care, I'll pay it. But some guy was in line in front of me and he was complaining, bitching about the price. I said, why don't you go get a goddamn little pizzeria guy? Yeah, I'll cut that out later. Why don't you go get some of their pizza if you don't like it? They're really cheap. You can get a whole pie for less than this. But
Yeah.
I mean, go get a Totino's if that's what you want. If you don't want to spend the money, don't go. Do people bitch about prices and stuff because of the lowballing of some of these chains?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And actually, our prices were probably too reasonable. We managed to keep them fairly low because because of how we were working in our margins, and we were just doing everything ourselves. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certain foods that are deemed, as of lower value, I guess. They should be inexpensive. They should be inexpensive. People don't want to pay a lot of money for, like a slice of pizza, a taco, whatever it may be, that they just think is an inexpensive food or a fast food. And, we were doing the best quality ingredients, like all by hand, just hours and hours of manpower. And then people would come in and say, oh, I'm gonna pay this, but first of all, it wasn't that expensive. But second of all, you don't have to. You could go somewhere else. But it's just that perception that, no, this needs to be cheap. Like, you have no right to ask these prices. This needs to be cheap, because of that expectation being built in part by, unfortunately, chain restaurants, undercutting everyone on everything to make these artificially low prices, and using, inexpensive ingredients, etc. But of course, obviously, I can't get my ingredients at a price that someone who is buying, flatbed trucks of ingredients can.
Yeah.
And, and then they're shortchanging their staff, and, the list goes on and on. But people still are expecting those prices. And it's funny because they can, they taste the difference. They can taste the difference, and they say, oh, this is better. Or I don't have heartburn after I eat your food. I feel good after I eat this food. I don't feel bad. As one of our customers once said, I don't hate myself after I eat your food. But they can't get over especially because we weren't, it wasn't a high-end white tablecloth kind of place. They just couldn't get over that feeling that, but I need this to be cheaper. So it's definitely and for independent restaurants, really small, really truly independent restaurants, that can be such a hurdle to get over, people's expectations of food prices. Especially now, you can see that, food prices are rising, and people are, very quickly get very upset about it, because in the United States, people don't necessarily value food in the way they do other things. So while they'll absorb price increase in so many things, oh yeah, electronics get more expensive every 6 months, everything, but my food, no way, I won't do it. I won't up my food budget.
It irritates me because I see so many people that grow produce or make specialty foods, and still people complain. But it's really weird because they'll go to a French restaurant or they'll go to a steakhouse, and they'll pay like $50 for a steak that I could probably buy at Safeway for $6. And we have this bizarre world thing in America where, like French food, for instance, there's a lot of stuff like you could buy it at Safeway for like $3 to $5, but they're at the French restaurants, they're going to put some cognac on it, catch it on fire a little bit, and you're going to pay $70 for it. And it's just like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of like, people aren't really thinking it through. And then the whole thing about, I tell my kids all the time, they go, let's get some pizza. And I said, if we can get a pizza here in 30 minutes and it's only $20 for 2 pizzas, I don't want it, because that's going to be crap pizza. And they're like, oh, and I can see the light bulb going over their head. I'm like, what? I said, why? How did they make that? I said, you see me make pizza. It takes me like, several minutes to make it and like do the whole thing. It's hours of work. I said, think about that when you get a pizza that you got to your door in 30 minutes. Think about what entailed there,
Yeah, there's just level upon level upon level. And of course, you know what I mean? In my life, I have been in a position where I faced food insecurity, or not having enough income, and even working in the food industry, like still not being able to feed myself, so like, I don't ever want to minimize that. But the truth of the matter is, there's this the perceived value of what it means to go out and dine at a fine dining establishment, where you're not going to have more food. The value is in how it's prepared, how it's presented, what your surroundings are, how you're being treated, is how you're being catered to. Is somebody taking the crumbs off your table while you're dining? And are you having this service that's very, whatever you want to call it, with a flourish, versus, is it just, and of course that's what sort of this, trap that a lot of small independent restaurant owners, food trucks, caterers, whatever it may be, and especially if they are what's considered quote unquote ethnic, and that's where people are suddenly the perception of value isn't there. And, no matter how good the food is, the idea that they would pay for it above a certain point just doesn't resonate. And then, like you said, I mean, if you don't understand how the pricing works or how these factors come together, and you don't understand why somebody can afford to sell a pizza for $10, whereas somebody else cannot, then it needs to charge $20. There's there's just a whole world in there of history and knowledge and, economics and culture that we could dissect for eternity. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating, especially, to be in the food business and know how people see the food and, and value it.
Now, I worked in a Mexican restaurant for 2 years, and I could still eat Mexican food 3 times a day, 7 days a week, and never, ever complain or get tired of it. I always be like down for that. Can you eat pizza every day? Is there a point where you're like, enough pizza?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny, but our pizza, so let me preface this by saying, I grew up in Southeastern Michigan, and I didn't eat much pizza growing up. And it's definitely a very different kind of pizza. And then I moved to New York City 20 years ago, and you can get a bad slice in New York City. Don't get me wrong, you get a really bad slice in New York City. They're everywhere, but you can also get a good slice. Pizza is something that, in theory, I could probably eat every day, because at its most foundational, elements, it's just bread and cheese and vegetables and meats and, and just good, wholesome food. But that being said, I don't eat anybody's pizza except ours. I don't eat anybody's pizza except my husband. I haven't had pizza from anybody but my husband, like, since I met him, really, 13 years ago. And that's how I met him. I met him in a pizzeria. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'll eat his pizza anytime, any day, but for me, it's home cooking. So, I can't really answer that question, really, I mean, I'm biased, but there are a lot of people who can eat pizza every day and do, and I mean, of course, when we're saying Mexican food, I mean, the different regions of Mexico, you're talking about incredible variation. You're talking about, incredible richness of food culture and, so much food. So I would hope anybody could eat that every day. But if we're talking about sort of Americanized, Mexican restaurant food, still, if you break it down and look at what it is, if it's a decent restaurant, then it's good food. It's good basic food. You're getting vegetables, you're getting, beans and grains and some meats and seafood. And, so you should be able to eat that every day if it's being made with any modicum of, just the basic.
Now, I was going to ask you, do you have your favorite pie?
Well, yeah. So my husband makes me a white pie. He makes me a white pie with ricotta, or rigotte as they call it around here, and mozzarella, he does fresh grana padano, so lots of, and I love it with hot cherry peppers, like vinegared, hot cherry peppers, sometimes a little fresh basil. He'll throw on other veggies for me sometimes, but pretty basic. And so that's my go-to pie.
That sounds amazing. Oh my God, that sounds so wonderful. I hope you guys do get to open up again soon.
I know, or at least let's hope he makes me some pizza soon. I gotta make a request.
Yeah. Now, you grew up in a family of cooks and artists. How did this influence your career?
It influenced me in two ways. So I grew up around food, people. When I was very young, my grandmother, who was a really accomplished home cook, and all, like, sort of a scientist in the kitchen. She did a lot of changing of food and, food substitutions, but she also worked in a bakery professionally. And I would go visit her in the bakery. And my dad was cooking off and on the whole time I was growing up. And then my mom became, when I was maybe in middle school, she was a cake decorator, and she became a pastry chef, and then she started her own like little business doing wedding cakes and things. I mean, if that was a long time ago, if it was in the days of social media, she's a really excellent cake decorator. I'm sure she could have had just a thriving online presence. So I just grew up with it as such a part of my life. Everybody else in my family is also very artistic. My dad plays music. My mom was a dancer and plays music. My grandmother, which is my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, was in fine arts. She did oil painting, sculpture. I mean, really anything. She did it all. So my brother is a writer and an artist. I cook. So I was sort of the least artistic out of the whole family. So for me, food was my, medium. And I think the other way that influenced me is because I came from that background. We were very non-traditional. It didn't really occur to me to have a traditional career. It didn't really occur to me to maybe I'll go to law school or something like that. So I think I just, between the cooking and food writing and, just loving creation around food, I just tumbled into it sort of, without too much thought.
Now, you're a graduate of the National Gourmet Institute for Food and Health. How did that influence your cooking and your career?
Well, as I mentioned, I came from a very non-traditional background.
Yeah.
I was, at the time that I attended cooking school, I knew I wanted to go to cooking school. I knew I wanted to not just cook professionally, but pursue food writing. I've always loved, food writing, and been a cookbook collector. And I bought my first cookbooks for myself at the Scholastic Book Fair in 4th grade.
Yeah.
I still have them.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, and the Natural Gourmet, it has since been rolled into the Institute for Culinary Education, and it's one of their programs. At the time, it was this funky little kind of like hippie cooking school in Chelsea, in Manhattan. And so I had an amazing time there. I met amazing people. But of course, it meant that it funneled my career, sort of into a very specific direction, because this was food for health, vegetarian and vegan baking and cooking. So, I went into that arena, cooking in the city. So it was good and I enjoyed it. But, at some point I realized I didn't necessarily want to just stay in that world. I wanted to expand out farther. So then I had to do that by myself,
I read on your comments on social media, and you talked about having ADHD, as I have, and I also was diagnosed with dyslexia, and it's been a challenge to me career-wise. It actually, I think because of that, I chose not to be a sous chef at one point, because I didn't want the chefs hating my guts, because I'd be messing up orders or whatever. So how does this affected your career choices and your schooling and everything?
Well, I'm still learning the answer to that, because I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until about 4 years ago.
Very common. Yeah, that's happened to a lot of people.
So I didn't know, and so I'm still looking back, and in retrospect, sort of examining and realizing oh, okay. So, I think the major impact it had on me and my career was that, I struggled with things in a way that I couldn't understand. And, in the long run, I guess it's a positive, but I've had a really varied, career, and I have a lot of different experience, because I couldn't seem to just, take one straight route,
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Goal.
Yeah.
So I've worked in a lot of different environments, and I've had a lot of different experience. People ask me like, what's your specialty? And I always, it's like, but I don't know, specialty, like cooking, I cook. And they're like, yeah, but do you cook Italian? Do you do this? Do you do that? Like, I'm not really sure what you're asking me, because I cook, like whatever, everything.
Yeah.
I was always trying to make my business to learn everything humanly possible, and if I go in somebody's kitchen, in their home kitchen, professional kitchen, whatever, and they're doing something I haven't seen before, I'm like in there trying to learn it and memorize it. So I think has become a strength for me, but it definitely hindered my ability in the beginning to just take a straight route in my career and just decide to go from point A to point B. For me, there's a lot of points between point A and point B that I had to go, through. So, and again, like I said, I'm still sort of trying to understand it and learn more about it. I think though it did give me a lot of openness, a lot of compassion. I come from a family with, some different disabilities and differences. And so even though I didn't know about all of mine, I already was open to the idea that, we all just operate differently and just need support in being able to, operate to our fullest potential. We don't need to be told what's wrong with us. We need to be told or helped, or if nothing else, just not hindered to be able to do what we can do to our best of our abilities. And, now that I know, it's really helping me, because the things where I used to push myself really hard and not understand why I would have a hard time with them, that, well, I need to do this thing, and like, why am I not doing it? And, now I finally have more compassion for myself and can, deal with myself more sympathetically, and make allowances for myself, because I would never do that for myself. I would never make allowances for myself. I would just always be frustrated with myself.
I think a lot of ADHD people, in my experience, are really hard on themselves. I think the one thing I've noticed that is a commonality between people with dyslexia or ADHD or both, or any kind of learning disability, is that they are the toughest on themselves than they are on anybody else. Do you think that's common with you too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will make, concessions, or, try to be helpful or forgive or whatever, like everybody else. And then when it comes to myself, I'll just turn on myself and, what is wrong? I would never even not just talk to somebody else that way, but like even think about them that way, and then I'll just turn on myself and be so harsh, like, so, so unkind. So that's really, and of course, in the food industry, that is, considered like a strength, or, what I mean? Like it's really easy to just continue to grow that, because it's considered a good thing. Like, yeah, you're hard on yourself. You never take a break. You never, like, you're gonna
right
make somebody proud, or I don't know what you're really gonna achieve with that, but that's the idea. So that didn't, it didn't stop me. It encouraged me to be more that way, and to be more harsh with myself. So that's what I'm, working on now. But then I was teaching, before we opened the restaurant, I was teaching full time for Project Renewal in Manhattan. They have a culinary arts training program for adults who are returning to the workforce, whether they're coming from my program. Well, actually, I was director of the program before I left, was specifically for veterans returning to the workforce.
Nice.
But it was
Very
also
good.
their original program is for coming out of incarceration, coming out of addiction, whatever, and being able to get back into life. And I loved, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. I loved teaching. And and my students were, like from 20 years old to 60 years old. And with them, I loved teaching, and I loved being able to give them an environment that I hoped was supportive and structured, and, allowed them to have what they needed and allowed them to progress, and knowing there would be issues there. There would always be issues there. And so I guess it was also, in reality, now that I look back on it, a very good environment for me as well. Probably part of why I loved it so much, because there was a lot of support, in place. They had, counselors they could talk to. They were support in place for their needs. And I was a part of that. I'd be checking up on them and, I had to write reports and et cetera. But I think in that environment, it also sort of allowed me to sort of reimagine what, my food career could be, or how being in the food industry could be, if that makes sense.
It's so important, I think, that we have programs for people that might be addicts or formerly incarcerated or veterans, because I think all these people and many others, we just need, I think, oftentimes training to do something that we can have that's our own, that kind of takes away from this other label that's been slapped on us, or we've even slapped on ourselves. And I just think it's so important that we encourage programs like this in America, because so oftentimes we just, we want people to like change or do better, but we don't offer them the tools. And so often I just see people flounder or go back to what they knew because they didn't have the tools to move forward and find something they can excel at.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think first and foremost, people deserve to be acknowledged and, to be told that, or shown, demonstrated that they have value, intrinsic value as people. And we fall down a lot. We fail a lot at that in the society. And then the rest just spirals out. So, whatever your issue may be, whatever you're struggling with, wherever you've gotten to in life, I don't think it's until you feel recognized as an intrinsically valuable human being that you can repair. You have to feel it for yourself, but let's face it, we're all together. You have to see it from somebody else, because if everybody's treating you or telling you that you have no value, and of course, if we're coming from a background where we've had those kind of challenges, most of the time that's what's happening. Where do you go from there? So, that's sort of the foundational place to find a way out or a step up. And, that when I was disparaging myself over, my ADHD, I was telling myself I didn't have value, that I was something wrong. And, I wasn't as valuable or valuable as a person. And so that's, I would love to live in a world where we all are supportive and we all want to lift each other up. But I would hope that it, at the very least, we can do that for each other, or there is, it only takes one person. There's someone who will do that for you, recognizing you, so that you can progress from wherever you are, so that, because again, we all deserve a career, we all deserve or a means to support ourselves, but we also, all need a fulfilled life.
Yeah.
All of us, whomever we are, whatever position we're in, and because intrinsically at our core, at our center, whatever, if you want to call it, your soul, your being, we're all identical, and what we're outwardly appearing to someone else doesn't change that, and it never will.
Yeah.
And but that's the funny thing, like me understanding that about somebody else, but then trying to bring it home to myself was a challenge.
Well, yeah, I was the same way, because I didn't go to school for like 25 years because I was in special ed. I almost didn't graduate. I was like, I'm too dumb to go to college, right? But now I'm a librarian. And like, I think a lot of times we do it to ourselves. We slap the label on ourselves more than anybody else does. And I think that people with learning disabilities, we're so hard on ourselves. We could work twice as hard as anybody else, but we're still looking in the mirror going, you loser, you can't do this. It's hard. It's a hard obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, and since you brought it up, I mean, I went back to school. I finally finished college in my 30s. I went back to school, but it was a school that specialized in, it's City College of New York, but they have a school for working adults.
Yeah.
I had struggled with school so much, I had struggled getting through because of my issues that I didn't know I had, and the funny thing is I went back to school for psychology and human services, and I was taking
nice.
classes, about disability, and it's still not registering.
No,
still
that's so
not
common.
understanding
That's
this
so
was
common.
me,
Yeah.
And but I did go that route, and I did finally finish my degree, but same thing, like I still somehow didn't feel, that I was doing enough. And it wasn't, it didn't matter because I didn't graduate from Princeton when I was 20, or whatever. Like I wasn't, a genius.
Right.
So it wasn't, who cares? Nobody cares what you've accomplished, and that's the other thing, like learning now to give myself credit for all that I have done with, lacking in knowledge and tools that could have helped,
Well, I think also, and I know you've probably seen this too. Like I've seen people that are addicts who are poor. I mean, I'm related to addicts that are poor, and I've, seen addicts that are rich. And there's a big difference between those two groups because both of them are addicts, but at the same time, they're both labeled differently and society sees them both differently. And I've seen people that are ex-cons that are like, they come from like a wealthy background, and ex-cons that come from a poor background. And again, labeling is very different for both of these groups. And I think a lot of it is how we see economic status. And like, I won't mention a politician, but there's a politician who's got a relative that's an ex-addict, and they're seen with no stigma at all, really. But if one of my relatives that is an addict was trying to do the same thing, I don't think they would be like, get out of here, you're an addict. So I think it's different treatment for different socioeconomic groups.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, class factors into it, economics factor into it. I mean, just there's no denying it. I mean, why do we say white collar crime? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
What does that
exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, oh, it's fine, you're good.
Yeah.
You're
almost rewarded for it. Here's a job when you get out.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. It's unfortunate, but it's definitely true.
All right. On a lighter note, tell us about Chef's Feed and what it is.
Sure. So I just posted a class there today. So Chef's Feed is a platform, an online platform for chefs. Originally, it was you could actually, I mean, you still can, but pre-pandemic, it was mainly a platform for chefs to sell events. So you could do private dinners, etc. During the last couple of years, it pivoted to doing more virtual events. So I do virtual cooking classes there, but it's also a way to support a chef's work. So it's sort of like a Patreon in a sense, you know what I mean? So you can decide to go to my Chef's Feed page, Chef Taffy Elrod, and just sign up for my feed. And if you want to, you can support me monetarily by signing up for a monthly subscription. So that, so it's another way to support chefs' work. That helps me to be able to do the cooking classes and do my work. And I share I share recipes there and like updates on what I'm doing. I've had so much going on these last like 2 or 3 months. I haven't been as active there as I would like to be. I'm trying to ramp it back up now. Or you can also just come there and sign up for a virtual class. And if you are there, in theory, once I begin to do more real life events, I can also sell those or post those through there. So if I'm doing a pop-up or a private dinner, or we're doing a one night pizzeria back for one night, you would be able to buy a ticket there or buy a meal there, or etc.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
So now, for those listeners who are listening to us right now, I'm going to include a link to Chef's Feed in the bio, so you can look for that and find it there. What excites you in cooking right now, and what things are inspiring you?
It's actually a really exciting time in food and cooking. and it's a time that I think I've been waiting a long time to, to see. So, I mean, there's so much, but obviously for me, watching African-American food come to the forefront, watching all these different, indigenous, Native American food start to come to the forefront, not just to be appreciated by someone else, but, within people's communities, rebuilding, their foodways and reconnecting with their foodways and, healing their own selves through that, but also as, something that was not being appreciated in food media, that, the cookbooks that weren't being published, the shows that weren't being made, watching all of that come to the, like just flourish is so, I mean, and the list goes on and on. There's so much, the Korean food is having a moment right now. Filipino food is having a moment right now. I mean, I hope it's not a moment. I hope it's a lot more than that. I hope this is, going to continue to be appreciated, because it's already such a part of our culture in this country. You know what I mean? It's so, and such a wonderful, meaningful part of our culture in this country, that I hope that it just continues to flourish in terms of being appreciated. And, because it's not that it wasn't there, it's just that the powers that be weren't sharing it, or saying, no, nobody cares about that story, or nobody's interested, and I really hope that that's really changing for good, and of course there's younger people coming up every day that are going, the industry, all the industries are changing as they come into the industries and have different expectations and different, understandings of the rights that they have and how they, deserve to be seen and heard. So, I mean, all of that, I don't, I could just go on and on, but there's just so much great stuff happening, and I just find it thrilling.
So who are some of your chef role models and cooking author role models?
Yeah, there's so many. It's so hard.
It is. No, it is.
Kind of make a list, because I'm like, I'm not going to remember anybody's name and I'm going to be mad. But, so if I want to go a little farther back, obviously, I'll never forget being in my early 20s, it was before I went to cooking school, and finding a Jessica B. Harris cookbook in like my local second bookstore, whatever, and being in shock, because I had never seen anything about, African diaspora cooking, and never, like, just being completely blown away. So she absolutely, of course, had huge effect on me. But there's so many. I mean, there's so many people right now doing great work. And then there's these, I was also really, when I was younger, really affected by the work of Madeline Kaman. Same thing. I had never really seen a woman as, as a serious chef, as a serious cook presented, beyond kind of the Betty Crocker stuff, whatever. That was big for me. Oh man. And, right now, gosh, there's just so many people doing so much great stuff. I mean, obviously there's, Michael Twitty's out there doing the, Cooking Gene stuff.
I love him. I love all his books. He's amazing.
He is amazing. But there's so many others. Therese Nelson, Black Culinary, man. And that, there's people who aren't as, I mean, of course there's Sean Sherman, but, I follow somebody on social media, Linda Black Elk. She's like teaching, in her community.
Yeah.
Of course, Tony Tipton Martin is, now at Cook's Country. But you know what? I also just still love Mangchi videos on YouTube. Like, she's killing it.
Oh my God. I love her so much. I would love to have her on the show. She's just the best. And her YouTube videos are so freaking awesome. Her cookbook is really good as well.
Yeah, I have two cookbooks. I mean, when I was younger and trying to find, Korean cookbooks in English, there weren't any. I mean, she was like groundbreaking, and that's what I mean. Why were there none? That's insane. I don't, it's ridiculous.
She's wicked funny too, and I love her outfits that she wears on this show.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. But she, her recipes work and her information is great. It's solid. That's the other side of it. So, she's more than just an influencer. But yeah, I mean, really could just and you know what's gonna, like, that's the thing. I was like, and then I'm gonna feel bad because I didn't mention the 100 other people who I think are amazing. You know what I mean? So whoever you are, I'm thinking about you. I just can't think of your name right now.
We do live in an embarrassment of cooks and chefs that are famous right now. I mean, if you watch Hulu or you watch Netflix or any of these channels that you can get online now, I think like a quarter of the shows are cooking shows now, and they're all trending and doing very well. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, the Great British Bake Off, we watch that every week like some people watch football. And it's a big deal, you know. People talk about it. If people lose, they're like, "Oh, that's not fair," you know.
That's right. You reminded me there's a new episode tonight, right?
Yeah. We'll be watching it.
That's right. I had never watched it. I had not watched like any television for probably 10 years before, you know, the lockdown. So I like binged, I don't know, like 10 episodes or something, whatever it is, including the holiday ones of the Great British Baking Show.
Oh yeah, those are great.
Within a few months. It was like a crash course. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you follow me on social media, if you are on my website or whatever, like you'll see more of the chefs who I respect and admire, because I don't want to leave anybody out. But you know, there's like you said, it's an embarrassment of riches right now. There's just so much.
My wife always laughs because I don't watch sports. I'm not a big sports guy, but I'll get up from the couch and I'll be like, my hands in the air, like, what, a third layer of the cake? Are you insane? That's gonna fall. Or you're putting it in too late. Get that in the oven sooner. Or that's gonna need to cool. That fondant's gonna melt. What are you doing?
Yeah, my husband, he at first, like, I was watching it and he just kind of wasn't, tuned into it. And now, like, he has, like, he's gotten into it. Now he's the one who's like, if they're gonna send this guy home, I'm not gonna watch it anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it draws you in. You get there because we don't watch sports either one of us. So
yeah, I couldn't tell you who's on most of the time. I don't know. My son is a big sports fan, but I'm like, is that baseball, football? Who's playing? I don't know. He's like, Dad, it's football season. Get a grip. Now, what's next for you?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. That's what I'm working on right now. We'll see. I'm going to continue to do virtual teaching and hopefully some live in-person teaching again. I really miss, working with people with food and teaching. I will continue to be doing, recipe development, but I'm hoping that we will be able to find a brick and mortar kitchen. It probably won't be a restaurant in the way it was before. I don't think either one of us intends to go back to working 16-hour days again, but
yeah,
but something a little more integrative of, our food plus my teaching and cooking and, something where we can have it in a different way. But, we miss having a kitchen. We miss being able to serve food to people. And, I would love to, for a while I was even selling like granola out of our pizzeria. we would close the pizzeria at night and we were baking granola by the ton, and shipping it out. So okay, it wasn't a ton, but it felt like it. So we miss having a certified kitchen where we can serve food.
If you could cook dinner for up to 10 people, living or dead, who would you cook for and invite, and what would you cook?
It's funny. I've been thinking about this question. I really, maybe this is self-serving, but I really would, if I could cook dinner for my grandparents, all of whom are deceased.
Yeah, I get that.
And my great aunt, who unfortunately is deceased, and some of my great grandparents. I only met one of my great grandmothers, and by the time I met her, she was very grumpy. But by all accounts, she was a master baker of pies and breads. She was a farmhouse wife. And I have a very varied heritage. They're from different backgrounds. So some, my great grandparents, some of them, came over here from somewhere else, and I know they wouldn't all fit. I would have to choose who could come and who wouldn't if I'm having all my grandparents. But a lot of my elders I never got to cook for. my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who really influenced me and raised us, she passed when I was about 18. So to be able to have a meal and share a meal and, and ask questions and would be more than a dream come true. And I would just cook, our favorite comfort foods. My husband and I mean, I guess we'd have to make pizza, wouldn't we? But
Yeah.
I would say, one of our favorite dishes is like just a slow braised, really simple slow braised short ribs. My grandmother was vegetarian, so I would have to make I think I'd make her my favorite like vegetarian quote unquote shepherd's pie. And
Nice.
we always have feta cheese and olives and some sort of salad on the table. And, just and lots of vegetable side dishes. I just love like roasted vegetables and a fresh vegetable and a salad and of course desserts and pineapple upside down cake. And I'd have to make my grandmother my sweet potato pie, and I'd have to make her my pecan pie, and I'd probably have to make something that she taught me to make and ask her if I did it right. So yeah, I mean, it would just really be home cooking comfort food with these people who I just wish I knew more about. I would just love to be able to talk to them and ask them questions, and hopefully they'd show me some tricks in the kitchen and and just learn, because I'm at the point in my life where I really feel their absence and just would love to just have one more conversation.
I think our relationships with our grandparents are often wasted by our youth. I think we could talk so much better with them as we get older. And then now that I'm getting to be the age of a grandparent, I find that I would love to talk to my grandparents who are deceased, because I really feel like I was too stupid when I was younger to really know what to talk to them about. I didn't have the life experience to really relate to them, So it's a crime, that we lose them so early, and then we miss out on the really good conversations we could have had when we're older.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I luckily, because we were with my maternal grandmother, I did get to spend more time with her than anybody else. And I did learn a lot about, her family and her history, but the rest of my grandparents, I really missed out on spending more time with them. And of course, yeah, I mean, at that age, when you're 17, when you're 10, what do you talk to your grandparents about? It's not the meaty life stuff that you, that you would want to ask them about as an adult. Yeah. Now
I got to ask you one more question. Since we're approaching Thanksgiving, are you cooking Thanksgiving dinner? And if so, what are you cooking?
I don't know yet. We haven't decided what we're doing. It's just my husband and I. We don't have any family in this area, and we used to always. It was our busiest. The day before Thanksgiving was one of our busiest days of the year in the restaurant. So we would just collapse on Thanksgiving Day and just eat leftovers. So I don't know. I have no idea. And that's not a very exciting answer. And we don't have any. For Thanksgiving, like, we don't have any specific foods that we make. I grew up vegetarian, so I don't care whether there's a turkey there or not, because I didn't grow up.
Yeah.
I'm more engaged in other things. I usually make sweet potato pie. I usually make greens.
Yeah.
And I make kind of my own version of sweet potato pie that's a little bit more custardy, I think. But and then sometimes we'll make like, some different Cornish game hens or something like that, especially if it's just two of us. We've done venison, we've done different things.
Nice.
Yeah, or vegetarian. Like, to me, it's funny, to me, like the comfort meal of Thanksgiving is just like a vegetarian meal. It's all about, like the sides and mashed potatoes. And my grandmother used to make the most insanely delicious dressing. I've never mastered it myself. So yeah, we shall see. I'm not sure, but we'll see.
Well, I hope you have a good Thanksgiving. That sounds really nice. Taffy, I want to thank you for being on the show. I've really enjoyed getting to talk to you, and I hope we get to talk again. This has been good.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for reaching out to me.
That was my conversation with Taffy Elrod, chef. Now, I wanted to also add that we had forgotten to include the information that the Chef's Feed platform is now rebranding and it is becoming the Tastemade Makers platform. So we wanted to go ahead and mention that there's a rebranding going on. So Chef's Feed is now called Tastemade Makers platform. And that was the bit we wanted to include that we had accidentally omitted in the conversation. On Wednesday, we're going to be having Faith Kramer on the podcast. She has a new book out called 52 Shabbats, Friday Night Dinners Inspired by a Global Jewish Kitchen. She was a wonderful guest, and I can't wait for you to hear that conversation on Wednesday. On Friday, we're going to have TV host, podcaster Rayshawn Parker from the Beyond the Check podcast TV show and TV show. He's going to be on Friday. I had a great time talking to him in his home in Georgia. So those are two guests to look forward to this week, and I hope you guys had a good holiday and looking forward to the holidays coming up. And until then, happy cooking.